Okay, so let's unpack this. We are stepping into a market today, but this isn't a place you can find on any map. You can't, navigate to it with your GPS.
Right.
It has no physical stalls, no cash register, and yet, virtually every single thing you hold dear, your attention, your dreams, your love, your very sense of self is constantly being evaluated.
And put it for sale.
Exactly. We are entering what our sources are calling the invisible market.
And that is such a powerful metaphor. It's really the perfect frame for this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to really get under the hood of this concept. We're drawing from a whole stack of sources that explore how our most intangible, our most sort of intrinsic human values have been systematically converted into marketable commodities.
We're going way beyond simple economics here.
Oh, way beyond.
Correct.
We're diving into the profound psychological and existential consequences of just existing in a world that operates on these hyper-transactional rules, where everything is measured, priced, and, potentially tradable. We are looking at the economy of the soul.
And the items stacked on this market's invisible shelves, they're truly revealing when you actually stop and look at them. I mean, think about it. You don't wait for attention anymore.
Yeah.
You can just buy it instantly through targeted ads or, getting the algorithm on your side. You can purchase a kind of temporary fame or notoriety, often just by generating scandal or controversy or just sheer noise.
Absolutely. And you can acquire admiration just by showing off your wealth or a highly curated, professionally edited lifestyle.
And then when you're completely depleted at the end of the day, just exhausted by the constant performance required to stay relevant, you can even buy a kind of simulated piece.
A simulated piece, yeah, with a few drinks or the latest self-care gadget.
Anything to dull the noise.
Anything to dull the internal noise
Yeah.
that the market created in the first place. But that leads to the central paradox, doesn't it? And it's immediate, and it's kind of crushing. The sources consistently highlight this contradiction. The more you buy in this invisible market, the emptier you feel.
It's a feedback loop.
It's a total feedback loop. The more you acquire these, like spiritual transactional goods, the likes, the followers, the fast experiences, the less capable you become of even recognizing what holds genuine, lasting value.
It's a self-consuming cycle.
Right, where the search for worth only generates a greater need for more transactional validation.
So what does this accumulation really mean for us, for the modern individual? I mean, if everything is purchasable, if I can buy connection, buy an image, buy comfort, buy the appearance of enlightenment,
And what's left?
what is left that is intrinsically real, untouchable? That right there is the agonizing question that modern civilization tries to avoid at all costs.
Because facing it requires admitting something really simple, but, terrifying.
Which is?
That true, profound, non-contingent value is currently buried under massive piles of these spiritual, highly commodified substitutes. We're mistaking the inventory for the treasure.
Our mission, then, is to start digging. We want you to walk away from this deep dive not just informed,
But equipped. Equipped to recognize the difference between value that's genuine and value that's just transacted.
Okay, so let's deepen this metaphor of the market. When we talk about sacred or intrinsic items being commercialized, it's so much more than the obvious things, the goods and services.
Right. It's not about selling cars or phones.
Not at all. The sources detail how things like recognition, loyalty, trust, even what were once seen as these irreplaceable organic dreams of youth, they've all been assigned an artificial commercial value, a value that can be influenced or just straight up bought.
And this is where the market truly becomes invisible, because even purely emotional or moral concepts are now packaged.
So take connection, for instance.
Yeah, let's take love.
Yeah.
Genuine love. The raw, challenging, unconditional kind is so often replaced by a simulated form. Kind of convenient, easy exchange of needs.
Where both parties are clear on what they're getting out of it.
Exactly. It's all about the mutual benefits they extract from the relationship. It's a low-risk, high-efficiency connection, not a deeply vested, unpredictable one.
It's the difference between a shared existence and a mutual contract.
That's a perfect way to put it. And the same thing happens with moral behavior.
How so?
Well, kindness and decency are often purchasable, not in a literal cash transaction, but they get packaged as a shiny opportunity.
A strategic move.
A totally strategic move, a calculated investment in one's personal brand or PR. If the price measured in visibility or positive public perception, is right.
Right.
People will exhibit this remarkable kindness.
So it seems like nothing is beyond the reach of this transactional calculus.
Nothing.
So this isn't just about how much money we make or spend. This is, at its core, an existential crisis about how we even define human reality.
It is. And our sources frame this perfectly by connecting it directly to the key insights of classical existential thought.
Which, when you look back at them now, they feel shockingly predictive.
Oh, it's chilling. Consider Albert Camus and the myth of Sisyphus.
Right. The man pushing the boulder.
Exactly. And Camus' central argument was that the modern tragedy isn't necessarily cruelty or, big, obvious suffering.
It's quieter than that.
Much quieter. He pointed to the sheer, quiet exhaustion caused by the world being, and this is a paraphrase, a market endlessly exchanging goods for the soul.
That concept of exhaustion is so powerful. How does that translate into, an average person's life today?
It translates directly to the pressure of personal branding, of constant optimization. Sisyphus pushes the boulder up, only for it to roll back down. In the invisible market, we constantly optimize our life, our image, our health, our career, our relationships, all to meet some external standard. We're pushing the boulder of our own identity up a hill, just hoping the market will finally recognize its value and reward us.
But it never does.
It never does. The market just slaps a new, higher price tag on the struggle and demands more performance. We're exhausted because the value we're seeking is external and transactional, never internal and complete.
And what about someone like Jean-Paul Sartre? With his deep focus on radical freedom and self-creation, what would he have to say about this?
Oh, Sartre would look at the modern person and see a tragedy of self-betrayal. He'd note that when intrinsic value becomes a commodity, the human being inevitably becomes a seller of themselves.
We're constantly defining ourselves by what we can sell.
Precisely. Not by our authentic free choices, our essence, but by how much we can successfully sell our time, our image, our emotional labor, our attention on the open market.
So the moment we start seeing ourselves as a product that needs constant improvement to meet market demand,
we lose our radical freedom.
we shift from existing to be a self to existing to be a successful product.
Perfectly said. Now, if we turn to Friedrich Nietzsche, he usually provides the most cutting, cynical remark of all.
I can imagine.
Nietzsche was obsessed with the collapse of traditional moral structures. He'd offer a cold, maybe even a disdainful laugh, and he'd say that in a world without common, shared, fixed values, where the old institutions like church or government have crumbled, the strongest person is simply the one who can set their own price.
Or, more accurately, the price for everyone else.
Exactly. It's a cynical view, but it suggests reality isn't defined by truth or morality anymore, but by the raw power to dictate terms in this invisible market. The one who sells the most compelling narrative wins.
So if you can't create authentic value, you just create profitable illusion.
That's the game. And finally, you have Søren Kierkegaard, who offers the spiritual warning that kind of transcends the economic critique.
He always brings it back to the individual spirit.
Always. He warns us that the death of the spirit begins precisely when we lose the capacity to see what is sacred, what's inviolable, what must never ever be traded.
The non-negotiables.
The non-negotiables. Once everything, from a quiet afternoon to a personal memory, is seen as transactional, as something that could be leveraged or sold, the sacred ground of the individual just disappears. We become merely a collection of measurable traits.
And we've seen this profound shift reflected in the way our sources describe how the whole metric of life has changed. I mean, in the past, people genuinely lived for these internal anchors, for honor, for a deeply held religious or political belief, for the rooted structure of their community, things you could never measure with currency.
And now, everything is reduced to a verifiable metric. It's not about honor, it's about your efficiency rating, your KPI.
It's not about deep belief, it's about how many followers you have, or how viral your opinion can go.
Right. It's not about quiet community support. It's about your market value or your net worth. This reduction. This is the new language of value. And it strips away all the qualitative meaning for quantitative data.
Which brings us right back to that major paradox we started with.
It does. When value can be bought, when you can purchase the appearance of a meaningful life, true, messy, earned value just disappears from common sight.
It's like blinding neon lights obscuring a quiet, steady candlelight.
What a great image. The artificial light is so intense, so pervasive, that we forget what quietness and darkness in reality even mean. We become allergic to the quiet.
So the immediate challenge for you, for the listener, is really existential, isn't it?
The challenge posed by all these thinkers is this. If society's universal value map is just a constantly shifting market index designed by the highest bidder, do we have the courage, the internal fortitude to draw our own map?
To define our own sacred ground, independent of the transaction.
To refuse to participate in the pricing game?
So the final takeaway from this first part, the first crucial realization we have to internalize, is that we don't ultimately lose our intrinsic value because the market forcibly bought it from us.
No. We lose it because we are the ones who allow others to set the price on our lives, on our worth, and on our emotional reality. We authorize the appraisal.
Okay, that transition is so critical because now we have to go beneath the surface and really understand the deeper societal and psychological tides that pushed us so willingly into this state.
Right.
It's so easy to just blame the market, but as the source material correctly notes, this was never a conscious, malicious decision by individuals.
No one wakes up and says, "Today I choose to become a commodity."
Exactly. It happens subtly. It's almost like a cultural osmosis.
It's an insidious, slow slide down a slope where the erosion of value is tragically mistaken for convenience or efficiency or even social progress.
So we can trace this willingness to commodify back to some core root causes.
4 of them, specifically. 4 societal and psychological root causes that have reshaped our internal landscape.
Let's start with the first one, which seems a little counterintuitive. The world of surplus and abundance. How does having too much lead to selling our soul?
It's absolutely critical to understand this. Modern life, especially in the developed world, is just defined by excess. Too many choices, too much information, too much noise, and just too much stuff.
So the economic reality for many is abundance, not scarcity.
Right, and when everything material is extra, when you can always have more, people fundamentally begin to forget that some things should never have a copy, a duplicate, or an easy replacement.
And the mind gets tricked. It starts applying the logic of material abundance to emotional and spiritual goods.
Precisely. The sources give clear examples of this mental trickery. You might easily buy 10 pairs of shoes, but you cannot buy a second, genuine, unshakable belief. You can purchase 50 compliments on social media, but you cannot buy that one person who truly sees you, who understands you unconditionally. The mind starts believing that if material resources are virtually unlimited, then intangible goods recognition, attention, belonging, that feeling of "I am valuable," must also be abundant and therefore cheaply purchasable through the market.
So this abundance of the material sphere, it actively masks the scarcity of the spiritual.
It does. And this circles back powerfully to Camus's idea of modern absurdity. Camus suggested that in modern existence, people are often cut off from their authentic selves by these thick layers of comfort, distraction, and illusion. A constant, purchasable supply of validation and entertainment.
Which creates a psychological environment where true value, which requires internal work and confrontation with reality,
becomes a luxury more scarce and difficult to attain than any material possession. The abundance of the market actively blinds us to the genuine scarcity of meaningful internal experience.
This moves us seamlessly into the second root cause, selling, meaning the psychological vacuum. This is an alarming observation. The moment society stops effectively teaching how to find meaning, the market immediately steps in to sell prefabricated meaning as a commodity.
This is the absolute genius of the invisible market. The market realizes that when spiritual structures break down, people are left with this innate, painful void.
And that void can't tolerate silence.
Never. So the market packages and sells replacements. Just look at the modern meaning marketplace. You can buy meaning via an intensive inspirational course that promises to unlock your true purpose in a weekend.
Right.
You can buy confidence through visual adjustments, the filter, the cosmetic procedure, the perfectly staged photograph. You can buy success via a glossy, curated image of your life that just screams achievement. And you can definitely buy temporary peace via luxury wellness travel, confusing a geographical escape with true inner reconciliation.
The danger is confusing the purchase with the actual achievement of meaning.
Exactly. The spiral starts there. People feel an internal void because they genuinely don't know what they want or believe, so they buy what the visible crowd does.
They don't know who they truly are, so they purchase the best, most polished, most marketable version of themselves.
They stop living according to their own internal compass and start living meticulously according to other people's advertisements.
And this is where Nietzsche steps back in, isn't it? The loss of that internal compass leads to the creation of external idols.
That's Nietzsche's thesis on post-religious life. He argued that when people lose a grounding, immutable belief system, when the old gods are gone, they immediately seek new idols to bow down to.
And
Today, one of the most powerful, insidious new idols is the polished, self-optimized version of themselves. People end up bowing down to a shadow, a reflection of what society deems valuable, believing that reflection is their reality. They become worshippers of their own manufactured image.
that leads directly to the third root cause, which is so profoundly emotional. The fear of being left behind, or what our sources call invisibility anxiety.
And this is just driven into overdrive by digital culture. Modern existence is characterized by constant, overwhelming real-time comparison. We are perpetually aware of who has more, who is brighter, who is getting the lion's share of attention.
And seeing others constantly shine or achieve this visible success makes you feel inherently dimmer, inadequate, fundamentally alone.
That resulting anxiety must be a massive engine for the invisible market.
It's the primary fuel source. This fear drives people to compulsively buy things, these intangible anchors, to prove they are tethered to the desirable visible crowd.
They buy attention, so they won't be forgotten by the algorithm. They buy a perfected image, so they won't be despised or dismissed. They buy connection and affiliation, so they won't feel that paralyzing modern loneliness.
So the ultimate fear isn't poverty, it's irrelevance.
Absolutely. This is distilled into the source's sharp, revealing, though kind of foolishly phrased question. If I don't buy anything, if I don't engage in this transaction of visibility, will I become invisible?
And that question cuts right to the heart of the deepest modern fear. The fear of not being seen or being deemed worthless in the public eye.
And when this profound anxiety dictates your behavior, you stop living genuinely. You start performing continuously. You transition from being a human to being fundamentally a seller of your own image in a market where everyone is desperately vying for attention.
And finally, the fourth root cause, the efficiency paradigm. Our entire society, from tech to corporate life, is just geared toward measuring everything by performance, output, and utility.
This paradigm strips value of its intrinsic quality. Value is judged only by its output, its utility, the applause it generates, or its standout effect on a spreadsheet.
And this corporate language has infiltrated our private lives.
Completely. Kindness is no longer just a virtue, it becomes an image-building strategy, or a soft skill.
A long-term relationship isn't an organic connection, it becomes an emotional investment with clear anticipated returns.
And a person isn't an individual human being. They are reduced to a market capacity or a resource.
The minute we start applying these corporate efficiency metrics to our personal lives, we begin to treat our own soul like a business unit.
Which brings us back inevitably to Sartre. He would look at the immense fatigue in this system and say, when you define yourself solely and relentlessly by the gaze of others and the metrics of utility, you cease to be yourself.
You're just defined by external metrics of profit and utility, not internal authenticity.
And the self becomes this exhausting, never-ending project.
So if we synthesize all of this, the abundance, the vacuum, the anxiety, the efficiency, what is the deepest, most damaging tragedy created by this system?
The tragedy lies in the destruction of trust. The more things are sold, the less things are trusted. We start to doubt every sincere gesture.
We question kindness because it could just be an act for applause.
We doubt loyalty because it could be rewarded. We doubt love because we suspect it's just a convenient exchange of needs.
So this abundance of false or commodified values creates a profound existential dilemma.
Right. It's not a lack of value in the world, but such an abundance of values that are suspect, transactional, and therefore ultimately empty. This suspicion prevents us from experiencing true, non-transactional life.
The ultimate realization here is chilling, but it's necessary. When everything is purchasable, we lose the internal ability to recognize what cannot be bought.
And that is the precise moment we start to lose our footing and ultimately lose ourselves. So if we connect those societal roots to the practical, operational reality of the invisible market, we have to understand the hidden gears, the covert mechanisms that allow this system to thrive.
Peeling back the curtain on the market's operating system.
Exactly. Understanding these allows us to see precisely how easily slow, genuine value loses the race against fast transactional value.
So let's start with mechanism one, the production gap.
The production gap is this critical time discrepancy. True character, becoming a genuinely decent, reliable, wise person, that requires years of slow, rough, demanding effort. Failure, resilience, quiet reflection. It's high-cost, high-effort production.
Right.
A decent marketable image of a decent person, however, requires only a quick slogan, a flattering filter, a good photographer, or a strategic public appearance.
It's mass-produced, fast, and easily changeable.
Completely. And in the invisible market, people are instinctively attracted to what can be bought, used, and changed quickly to meet immediate social demands.
So the market incentivizes the easy substitute over the hard truth.
Absolutely. As Camus observed, people do not fear the truth. They only fear the truth takes time. If authenticity is difficult and slow, the market will always win by offering the convenient, instant, 80% good enough version.
The speed of the transaction overrides the depth of the substance.
Every time.
Mechanism number 2 builds right on that, rewarding performance over substance. This is the core issue of visibility.
What's the visibility bias? In the modern world, no one sees the 20 years you spend quietly reading, struggling with moral choices, and reflecting on your failures.
No. They see the photo in front of the impressive bookshelf, captioned with a profoundly insightful quote, and it gets thousands of likes.
That's it. No one witnesses the internal, agonizing struggle for kindness and patience. They only see the perfectly documented, publicized charitable act, complete with receipts and press releases.
So when the external gaze becomes the dominant metric for value, people actively start selling their genuine effort, their soul, to buy that external validation, the applause, the recognition. They monetize their own struggle.
And this leads to that sharp existential question we mentioned earlier. If others don't know I am kind, does kindness still have value?
The fact that that question is even psychologically compelling, it confirms the market's logic.
It does. People don't just want to be valuable. They desperately want their value to be publicly seen and validated. This visibility anxiety makes every private value tradable.
And mechanism 3 is the direct result of that anxiety. Fear creates the market for pretense. This is just, It's inextricably linked to the explosion of platforms built on instant visibility.
Instant visibility created this massive, relentless pressure. If you're not constantly running, you're seen as left behind. If you don't constantly shine, you're judged as inadequate by your own peers.
And this profound fear of obsolescence drives the market for fakes and pretense.
Totally. People buy light, like fame or visibility, instead of doing the internal work to create authentic light. They buy followers instead of earning genuinely lovable value. They buy an image instead of building real character.
They become consumers of identity rather than creators of a self.
That's Nietzsche's dark prophecy fulfilled. When people lose the will to create their own value, they live by the values sold by others. They just outsource their self-worth.
Now, for a mechanism that governs the transaction speed, mechanism 4, measuring value by convenience.
This is such a foundational, destructive filter. The easier something is to consume and spread, the less effort it takes for the viewer to understand or acquire, the better it is seen in the market.
Simplicity, speed, and ease become the highest metrics.
They're the only metrics.
But authentic, genuine value is fundamentally inconvenient.
It absolutely is.
True.
Lasting love is inconvenient. It demands presence, vulnerability, a sacrifice of ego.
Integrity is inconvenient. It requires saying no to immediate profit and advantage.
Kindness is inconvenient. It requires sitting with and understanding another's pain. Meaning is inconvenient. It requires difficult, lonely reflection.
Nietzsche's observation applies here. The greatest values always come with pain.
But the invisible market only sells the no pain, no thought, no delay version, ensuring that complex, real value is always sidelined.
Okay, let's talk about mechanism 5. The inability to tolerate emptiness. We seem to have lost the spiritual capacity for silence and internal space.
That internal emptiness, the sheer void that arises when we stop performing, it acts as the market's powerful black hole. It consumes everything thrown into it. Endless experiences, transient feelings, continuous distraction, compulsive purchases.
But the paradox, which is the market's cruel trick, is that the more we try to fill that void with purchased meaning, the hungrier it becomes.
And that fuels the painful existential self-questioning. Why do I feel a persistent lack the more I have accumulated?
It's the constant consumption that makes the soul feel starved.
It's a meaning-grinding machine. People run through these endless corridors of consumption, hoping to find a room labeled true value, only to find another sign that reads, new product launch by now.
Which moves us to mechanism 6, responsibility versus payment. This is what distinguishes real meaning from purchased meaning.
Yes, true meaning requires profound responsibility. A loving action requires being present, understanding the other person's reality, and paying a price in vulnerability.
A valuable, meaningful life requires paying a price in time, effort, solitude, resilience.
But sold meaning, it only requires a payment. A credit card swipe, a click, a subscription.
So people choose the fast, painless, pay-and-forget option, neglecting the fact that true meaning is found in the effort, the commitment, and the internal cost, not the immediate transaction.
And finally, mechanism 7, the marketization of moral norms. This is how ethics itself becomes a consumer good.
How does that manifest in everyday life? I mean, how do you buy morality?
Well, ethics and goodness become a readily available service package, bought via clicks and affiliations. You're told, you are a good person if you buy these specific green products.
Right.
You are deep and intellectual if you share these complex philosophy quotes without ever reading the source.
You are helpful if you share a trending video of an issue, even if you do nothing else.
Precisely. Morality becomes performative, segmented, and ultimately purchasable through aligning with the right brands or causes.
Which allows people to feel virtuous without doing the hard work of actually being virtuous.
Exactly. And Sartre's observation applies perfectly here. People escape the difficult burden of freedom and authentic moral thought by hiring others, or hiring brands and movements to do their thinking and their moral heavy lifting for them. They buy the moral appearance instead of living the messy, inconvenient moral truth.
So the ultimate insight here, having seen these gears turn, is it's brutal, but it's necessary for you to grasp.
It is this. It's not that the world sells value and forces us to buy it. It's that we actively, willingly put our own intrinsic values up for sale, believing they are only worth keeping if someone else, the market, society, the crowd, pays a measurable price for them.
We are both the product and the primary customer of the invisible market. That brings us to the most intimate and I think the most vulnerable part of this deep dive. We've mapped the societal mechanics, and now we have to look at the core of the problem, the human soul, the authentic innermost self.
Which was once considered inviolable.
Inviolable, and is now the final and most actively exchanged commodity. The question is just chilling. Who are we when we can literally purchase a better or more marketable version of ourselves?
This is the existential crisis of authenticity. We're forced to navigate the invisible market, constantly wearing the face society demands, chasing the success metrics society sells, all while knowing, deep down, that the life we are presenting is, at least in part, counterfeit.
Camus called this the profound absurdity.
Yes. Knowing the life is a performance, but feeling compelled to live it as if it were real and genuine.
The moment we accept that our fundamental self-worth can be contingent on external factors, on income, on gifts, on PR coverage, on attention, we completely lose the anchor of our true, unmeasured nature.
It's a corruption of the self. Sartre's famous doctrine, existence precedes essence, means that we must first exist and then we define our essence through our choices.
Right.
But when value is commodified, that essence is constantly pushed back, even erased, because we are too busy trying to be compatible with the market.
We stop existing to fulfill our potential, and we start living meticulously to align with popular demands.
Which inevitably leads to severe self-alienation. We become strangers to our own deepest motivations.
And if that state of alienation persists long enough, it leads to that core, painful fear. If I no longer know what is intrinsically real about my life, the motives, the joy, the connection, am I myself still real?
It sounds like a philosophical game, but it's the adult fear that festers when we live exclusively in the counterfeit.
And this environment is what plunges us squarely into the age of nihilism that Nietzsche warned us about.
Yes, and it's not just a lack of moral authority, but a time when all ideals are marketized and all beliefs are priced. We stop believing in others' values. We instinctively question every kind word as being transactional.
And most tragically,
we stop believing in our own internal, unmeasured worth. If I can't quantify my value, I start to suspect it doesn't even exist.
So let's make this tangible. For the listener living in this transactional environment, what are the concrete day-to-day impacts of this personal fallout?
Our sources identify several profound areas of personal damage. First, there's the loss of real feeling.
How do you mean?
Because we're taught to package and purchase experience, we forget how to feel naturally. Authentic, quiet joy, the kind you find in a peaceful, normal afternoon, is discounted.
Joy has to come from the photo-worthy location, the curated event, the massive accomplishment.
Right. Pride comes from the view count and the public acclaim, not from the hard internal work itself. We end up living entirely by others' feelings about us because their gaze and their reaction are the only acknowledged currency.
Second, there's the loss of trust.
As we discussed, doubt becomes a survival instinct. We've been burned by too many performances sold as truth. We question every compliment, every relationship. Do they genuinely love me, or are they loving the shiny, successful, convenient version they imagine I am?
And this relentless suspicion is tragic because it builds a wall
That prevents us from receiving genuine affection, even when it is sincerely and unconditionally offered.
Third, there's the loss of tolerance for solitude.
Yes, modern loneliness, as the sources note, is not the peaceful, reflective space that thinkers like Kierkegaard valued. It is the excruciating echo of social comparison.
Why does everyone else have everything? The perfect trip, the ideal partner, the thriving career, and I feel this profound gnawing lack.
Exactly that. And this panic drives us to constantly buy new things, seek new connections, or engage in continuous distraction. We try to purchase our way out of loneliness, which is structurally impossible, ensuring the void remains perpetually hungry.
Fourth, there's the loss of patience for true growth.
True. Lasting values like deeply integrated character, unconditional love, profound self-understanding, they require significant time, friction, maturation.
But the era of purchasable value creates an acute allergy to time and difficulty.
We lose the ability to wait, to build slowly, to truly mature into our decisions. We seek to download, meaning like an app, instantly, painlessly, and without personal cost.
It's this self-commodity. This is the culmination, isn't it? The moment the self is fully integrated into the market inventory.
Yes, we begin to evaluate ourselves entirely through others' eyes and market metrics. Does my value depend on attention, on my income, on the quality of my image?
Which leads to the crushing existential question when the market dips. If I have nothing left to sell, if my image fails, if my income drops, am I still worth living?
We treat ourselves like a depreciating product, then suffer the psychological damage when our supposed market value fluctuates.
And finally, sixth, the loss of unconditional connection.
If the entire world is constantly reinforcing a transactional mindset, we naturally bring that transactional view into our most intimate relationships. Love becomes a form of currency that we fear will be depreciated, stolen, or returned when the market changes.
The soul, having been marketized, views itself as a product.
Believing it must constantly perform and improve to maintain its relationship value and avoid being delisted.
So when you look at all six of these impacts, the ultimate tragic fallout is clear.
It's the pervasive underlying feeling that life has lost its meaning. Even when we are surrounded by comfort and material abundance, we are missing the one thing no market sells: a genuine, unassailable, non-contingent reason to live, separate from the transaction.
The world can sell everything, except the thing that matters most. Meaning cannot be bought. The crisis is forgetting that truth and living as if meaning is the cheapest, most easily acquired item on the shelf.
So if we connect this crisis to the bigger picture of the modern global structure, it's very easy for you, the listener, to fall into the trap of just blaming the system.
Right. Blaming big tech or society.
Exactly. And that reaction, while it's understandable, is often a convenient way to remove personal responsibility from the equation.
Because the invisible market wasn't designed by a cabal of evil masterminds.
Not at all. It was a deformed, high-speed evolution driven by systemic demands and, critically, our own human complicity.
But we have to acknowledge that the system's imperatives are relentless and global. It does pressure us into commodification.
Oh, absolutely. The underlying structures demand specific, measurable behaviors. I mean, look at the four major forces.
Okay.
First, the economic structure. It demands perpetual growth. That means everything, even our own consciousness, must eventually become a product or service to expand the market.
Second, the technological structure. It demands continuous attention and content, so everything has to be easily consumable, instantly engaging, and infinitely measurable.
Third, the cultural structure. It demands constant positive recognition, so everything has to have a marketable surface suitable for broadcasting.
And fourth, the educational or bureaucratic structure. It demands assessment and benchmarking, meaning everything must be reduced to a quantifiable metric.
So in its pursuit of efficiency and scale, society is structurally forced to measure value.
And the very act of measuring something turns it into a commodity because it becomes comparable and tradable.
Precisely. Now here's where we have to ask the tough question. Are we merely helpless victims of this massive measuring system?
And the answer is no.
No. We are active, though often unwitting, players who enthusiastically extend this invisible market every single day. We love speed, so the market sells us instant gratification. We love convenience, so the market sells us painless solutions. We fear invisibility, so the market sells us recognition and guaranteed attention.
We sustain this market with every click, every highly curated post, every purchase, and every time we rush to match the crowd's rhythm of performance.
And crucially, the structure itself isn't inherently evil. It's just hyper-optimized. It does exactly what it's designed to do: optimize, expand, and make efficient.
But the human soul does not follow this logic.
Not at all. The soul needs slowness, it needs doubt, it needs failure, it needs seemingly useless activities, and it desperately needs silence things the market structure cannot measure, cannot sell, and cannot successfully turn into a key performance indicator.
That structural mismatch is why we feel so lost and dislocated, even while living in the age of maximum convenience and efficiency.
We are trying to find soul nourishment in a machine designed for profit optimization. And that is where the existential voices offer the pathway back to personal agency.
Sartre reminds us that society hands us the standardized mask, the marketable identity.
But we are the ultimate decision makers who decide whether or not to wear it, or perhaps how tightly we cinch the straps.
Camus suggests that the absurdity isn't in the world itself, but in our impulse to try and apply these rigid, rational, logical rules to an unconscious, fundamentally unpredictable life.
We can't apply the rules of the market to the quest for meaning and expect anything other than profound disappointment.
And Kierkegaard offers the most personal, pointed critique aimed squarely at the individual.
He says, "The crowd itself is not guilty, but the individual who hides in the crowd to avoid the difficult question of who they truly are, that person is the one who loses their soul. The structure is only dangerous when we use it as an excuse to avoid personal accountability."
And we have to inject a note of necessary nuance here, a note about privilege.
We absolutely do. We cannot flippantly demand that everyone live slowly or question the market when many people are just focused on basic economic survival.
Right. Those living in the lower social strata have to prioritize speed and efficiency survival over these idealized, difficult values.
The system isn't inherently wrong for prioritizing efficiency in the production of goods. We are wrong for seeking meaning in a machine that was never designed to provide it. Our problem is misplaced faith, not universal malice.
So the burning question for you, the listener, who feels overwhelmed by the scale of this structure, remains. If the system is this big and this efficient, what can I, as one person, still do?
And the paradoxical answer is truly liberating.
You don't need to break the system.
You only need to stop equating your essential worth with the system. The market can sell the appearance of value, but it cannot force you to believe that the purchase value is real or enduring.
It can shape the economy, but it cannot define your soul.
It controls the speed of the age, but it cannot dictate the depth of your personal internal life. The path to reclaiming agency is not escaping the structure, but rather stopping the structure from dictating what is truly worth living for.
So we have analyzed the market, we've exposed its roots, and we've mapped its mechanisms. Now we arrive at the final crucial question. How do we live without selling our soul in this modern era? The answer isn't to abandon the world, but to choose what is worth living for, right in the noisy transactional center of the invisible market.
And these strategies are small, internal acts of rebellion. They're subtle shifts in perspective and behavior that are sufficient to reclaim the authentic self. They are, at their core, the refusal to participate in the pricing game.
Okay, strategy 1, restore the useless.
This is such a fundamental change in mindset. It means actively recognizing that not everything needs a price, a utility function, or a justification. We've been conditioned to attach value only to actions that yield profit, recognition, or optimization.
So we need to reclaim activities that are deliberately non-profitable.
Non-measurable and non-shareable. Walking aimlessly without taking a photo. Reading a book purely for absorption without summarizing it for social media. Loving deeply without calculating profit or loss. Or helping without seeking public credit.
Because meaning almost exclusively resides in these unprofitable acts.
They're solely for you.
Strategy 2, choose an unpurchasable core value.
True. Authentic value is not something the world labels you with. It's the internal metric, the one thing you hold is absolutely right, even if absolutely no one else cares or notices or rewards you for it.
So you have to name that core value for yourself.
Name it. Maybe it's unseen kindness, uncounted patience, radical self-honesty, or internal freedom. This is Nietzsche's concept of creating your own value, simplified down to a single, essential act, naming the one thing you will never sell, trade, or compromise.
That becomes your internal pillar.
And it immediately places you outside the market's control.
Strategy 3, practice slowness in key moments.
Slowness is not laziness. It is an active, profound resistance to the mechanism that dilutes value through speed and efficiency. The market hates slowness.
So you have to commit to it. Slow meals, conversations without screens.
Evenings without calculating your efficiency score, or mornings where you simply exist rather than immediately performing the marketed ritual of self-care.
And that slowness allows the internal voice that the market has drowned out with noise to finally be heard again.
It restores context.
Strategy 4, master the stoic art of refusal.
This is critical for defending the self. Refusal is not about rejecting money or opportunity entirely. It is about refusing to become the performance version that others want to buy.
Refuse to perform for attention. Refuse to sacrifice self-respect for notice or validation.
Epictetus taught us the ultimate defense. No one can take your soul unless you willingly place it on the table for negotiation. Refusal defends the non-negotiable core of the self against external transactional pressure.
Strategy 5, choose depth over quantity.
We are relentlessly taught to accumulate many friends, many goals, many opportunities, many skills.
But meaning is consistently found in depth, not breadth.
Focus your resources and your attention. One true, difficult friendship is more valuable than 50 easy transactional acquaintances. One job you genuinely believe in, despite the low pay, is better than 10 jobs you perform only for the metric.
Meaning doesn't need to be vast, it only needs to be real.
Deeply felt and deeply committed to.
Strategy 6, create a sacred, private space, the soul's room.
In an era of relentless, monetization-driven exposure, privacy is a radical act of rebellion.
Kierkegaard called this the room of the soul.
Yes, a psychological space where you are present only with yourself, unobserved and unjudged. Keep something private. A deep thought, a heartfelt belief, a painful memory, a moment of profound, simple joy that you never tell anyone or post online.
Because that untouchable, unshared territory is the only place the invisible market cannot reach or commercialize.
And this brings us to strategy 7, the ultimate unpurchasable culture.
This is the operational question that fundamentally separates value from the market and the soul from the shopping center.
And it is not a question to be answered once and filed away. It's one to be lived with, asked repeatedly throughout your life, becoming deeper and more challenging each time.
The question is this: if no one is watching, no one is evaluating, and no one is paying a price for this effort or this action, what will I still choose to live for?
That question is the key to reclaiming your deepest agency and defining your life outside the transactional sphere. So when we stop defining ourselves entirely by the purchasable things, by the metrics, the likes, the acquisitions, the speed, we become fundamentally free.
Free from the illusion that value is external.
Free from the crushing pressure to constantly be valuable to others.
Free from the critical, judging gaze of the crowd.
And finally, free from the version of ourselves that was designed purely for sale.
And in that hard-won freedom, we finally see what the invisible market has hidden all along. The value worth living for is not what we buy or what we sell, but that profound, quiet, non-negotiable thing we choose to hold on to when everything else in the world has been assigned a price tag.
Meaning did not disappear in this commercialized age. It is simply waiting for you to stop, step deliberately out of the constantly moving line, and ask with true courage, what in me right now is unpurchasable?